as all of you kind of saw in the previous email that went out, so really today we're going to go through how to utilize your quality assurance forms and all the data to ensure that agents are reaching their peak performance within SimTrain. And so obviously everyone has some type of QA process, whether it's manual, whether it's done via an auto QA system, you're looking at 10% of the calls or 100%, whatever it might be, none of that really matters when it comes to SimTrain. So I'm going to show you kind of a couple ways we can utilize different QA data to really help improve the agent's performance. And so the main things are how to build the sims that match to your QA scorecards, and then how to provide coaching opportunity to the specific agents for that. And then really the big question of this is the question of where to start first. When you're looking at building sims, it's really where's the biggest pain point, where's the biggest gap? And so that's kind of something that I'll break down when we're looking at the QA scorecards and all the data as well. But really, before I get started, just wanted to ask a couple questions here. So how many people right now on this call are actually utilizing their QA scorecards when they're building out their sims currently, if anyone? Feel free to come off mute, put it in the chat. Definitely, this call is for, all the sim trainers. So really want to make this as interactive as possible, answer all of your guys' questions, and really kind of get to the bottom of the tips and tricks that would help you guys the most. No one? Well, I'm glad we're going to go through it then.
I seen Callie pick people out of the crowd.
Right?
Yeah.
We're going to go with, I'm going to click on Andrea. I know that's something we've been talking about for kind of your current, process and looking at it. I know you guys are using an auto QA real-time tool as well. So I don't know if you can come off mute and kind of talk about what that looks like with how you're building out your sims currently.
Well, we just finished our first full simulation, so we haven't rolled it out live to any agents yet. But yeah, we rely highly on another piece of artificial intelligence for that portion. But I'd love to hear how that works, because we're still, getting introduced to the platform and how to enable all of the great features that it offers.
For sure. Awesome. And we'll get into all of that. Anyone else? Comments, other agenda items that they want to make sure to cover for today? Cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. What I'll kind of show you are 3 different tabs in here that are focused on not only the QA scorecard, but it's also pulling data from previous months to really identify where those specific pain points are at. So I'm going to kind of start with this tab. Again, as I'm going through this, feel free to interrupt me at any time if you guys have any questions or you want me to go back to anything. But really kind of looking at the data outside of SimTrain. These November findings are the specific areas that have been outlined in the QA scorecard that I'll get to in a little bit. But it easily identifies, for November, how many agents failed this specific metric. And so kind of looking at this, there's 3 big ones right off the top that are, the big components that the majority of the team has failed on. And then also mapping that to which one of these are auto pass or auto fails. So the fail component's the big piece of this as well, right? They're saying one wrong word, and even though they maybe got every other step of the call correct, they slipped up on one specific area, and that's where it caused them to fail. So really looking at the data to utilize, the process of where to start creating sims first, where are my agents really struggling with the most? And so I'm going to kind of move over to this tab. So what I did from this is kind of outlined, specific sims that can be made from this. And so when we talk about sims and modules, for example, we're talking about it from the training and the coaching side, right? QA data can be used not just to help coach and up-level your current agents, but we've seen with a lot of our customers that it actually maps back to training because it really helps them identify where they need to change some current training topics, maybe add some additional scenarios that aren't in training right now that we're seeing a high piece of in actual production as well. So it's really kind of tying to both of those. And so we'll talk through kind of the different use cases and what the actual rollout will look like in SimTrain as well. But kind of looking at this, so as you can see, all of the different findings we've had in our scorecard, I've mapped it to different topics that they kind of all bucket into. And so a lot of these things throughout a QA scorecard, right? We have the different processes, the different steps, they can all be bucketed together. And so that's how I kind of did it here. So for example, this first one is focused on soft skills. So really looking at, did they ask if there were any further questions? Big focus on empathy, didn't thank the customer, and then didn't use the appropriate language as well. So this is something when I'm building out and understanding what I want to build out is really figuring out, okay, is this something I want to be an entire sim? Or is this something where I want it to be a module where I know when agents are failing on their soft skills portion of QA, this is something we can just deploy this module out to them directly and have them practice that for the next, 15 minutes for the next week. And so that's something I think when we work with QA is really where SimTrain comes in, because they have so many great data and insights, whether it's done manually or through a system. But there's still that gap of how do you then utilize those insights and that data to help coach your agents? And so that's where that kind of manual process comes in. And that's where SimTrain really fits into that, because when these findings are happening, it's easy deployable simulations and modules that are already pre-built for these specific areas for them to go through and practice. So now they're not practicing on your customers. So I want to keep that in, have you guys keep that in mind when we're talking about this. It doesn't need to just be single simulations. It could be modules. It could be the random branch sims that we have. It could be all types of simulations in there. So to kind of break this down one step further is focus on visual simulation. So as most of you know, we do audio, we do chat, and then we do visual. So when we talk about visual sims, it doesn't just need to be the audio and the visual simulation hand in hand. It could be something where agents are struggling with not documenting the right information. And that's something where it doesn't necessarily mean that they're struggling with the conversation. They might just not know how to actually utilize the system or the multiple systems that they're going to be using. And so this is something where you can deploy visual only sims, where instead of it becoming the customer and the agent, it's more so the trainer and the trainee, because the trainer is really just kind of telling them and letting them understand where to click, what to type, and really go through and get that hands-on practice of the system navigation, especially when you guys are doing a lot of work with any of like the back office agents as well. You're switching over to new systems or new processes. Those visual only sims come in handy for that. So kind of mapping this out a little bit more. So typically when we look at QA, and again, I'll get to the QA scorecard in a second, but we'll look at, what is that opening process? Typically you have your opening, you have some type of like verification piece, and then you have like an appointment setting or sales aspect, and then you have the closing loop. And so this one's really focused on the opening process. So again, every time you're seeing now that agents are struggling with the opening process from QA, this is that sim or module you could assign to them to have them practice that. The other component of this is the auto fails, right? That's something we saw quite a few of the agents in November with a lot of those auto fails there. And so that's really looked at from a did not use appropriate language. When I get to the scorecard, it'll outline what exactly that language is. One key component of SimTrain is not only the keywords, but the negative keywords as well. So that's something where agents can now be subtracted points too if they were to say anything. Most of it's done from a slang or swear word perspective, but that's something I'll show you guys how to utilize that and map it to this specific area. And then the next one is really focused on the customer information. So obviously you want to verify all the customer's date of birth, the address, the name, and then document it in the system correctly as well. So that's something that, again, will kind of go hand in hand together as we build this out. So before I move on to the actual QA scorecard and break that out, are there any questions so far and kind of the thought process, how to bucket these out, things like that? Awesome. So now I'm going to move over to the actual scorecard. So when we're kind of looking this, like I mentioned, we have it kind of bucketed out into these different categories. So we have three main components. One is the welcome. The second one is focused on uncovering the needs and providing a resolution. And then that third one is the closing loop. the other piece of this is, like I mentioned earlier, is the autofill language. So this is something where if there's any swear words or slang related terminology, sup, oops, bummer, more of that common language that we hear throughout a day-to-day is obviously not something we want in a work environment. So when things like that happen, we want the agents to be aware of that behavior and provide that feedback within SimTrain. So kind of looking at this, when we look at the warmly welcome, we're looking at the opening process. So ensuring that they're greeting the customers, they're providing the appropriate branding. So not just the company name, but also the line of business that they're supporting. They're also providing their name and asking for the customer's name, and then acknowledging and addressing the customer by that name, and then moving on to how they can assist them. So when I look at all of these different components, these are things that can be graded on within SimTrain, right? They can all be used throughout the keywords and the alternative words. And when we're looking at this from a kind of rating or scale, this is something where it's worth 5 points. And so when we're mapping it to those keywords, we can adjust those points, whether it's 5 points in positive or 10 points in negative, to directly map to what the total score value would be within your QA platform as well. So that's something when you're measuring it in SimTrain versus auto QA or manual QA, looking at those scores directly is a huge component to really kind of streamline that process, whether it's being done where they're initially practicing it for the first time, or it's a week later since you provided that coaching and you want to see where they're at from an improvement perspective as well, is another component. Couple other things we're looking at here are really focused on the active listening, clarifying, confirming the customer's request, the acknowledge and relating. So any type of like empathy when needed, I can help you attitude, and then just overall professionalism. So in here we have, the different sentiments. So we have confidence, concentration, and energy. So that would kind of tie to that tone and clarity there. And then there's an area specifically on the visual side of things. So use of appropriate tools, presentation of resolution, those types of things. And then we'll move to the closing spiel. So looking at, reminding the customer of appointment requirements, asking if there's anything else they can assist with, and then just thanking them for their time. So this is really kind of the process we're going to look at. When we look at this scorecard, it's that entire kind of call flow broken out. And so when we look at merging that into SimTrain, we have 5 different ways to create the simulations. So that's something where it's this kind of endless opportunity where you can have one piece of content and create, 10 to 15 simulations out of it, totally depending on which agents are struggling with which areas. And now it's providing them that customized coaching piece that is one-on-one. And so that's a big thing that we hear from a lot of our customers right now is previously before SimTrain is it's really hard and it's a manual process to create these one-on-one coaching plans with agents and pull them off the phones and go through role plays manually. And then a week later, make sure that they're doing the right things and pulling all of that data again. And so this is something, again, when you're mapping it directly to SimTrain and your QA process, it streamlines that entire thing and saves a lot of time for QA and supervisors in general. So I'm going to actually go ahead and copy this link and share it in the chat. So as I'm going through the actual sim creation piece, you guys can still follow along with the QA scorecard and make sure I'm building everything properly in there as I'm kind of doing this. So I'm going to move to the sim creator role in here. So I'm going to come in and press create new sim. We're going to start with an audio sim only. For this one, I am going to focus on kind of to start off that golden call, that happy path, start to finish on what the entire QA scorecard and call would look like, and then show you how to break it down into these micro sims or modules and all of the other components in here. So let me go ahead and type this out. As you guys know, like I mentioned, we have the different types. We can utilize labels. So this is really just the way to kind of organize the overall sim library. So I can come in and do appointment setting. And this is kind of my golden call or happy path and really going in there. So now we have the ways to create the simulations. So I'm going to start off with uploading a script so you guys can see it. again, the big components of these are really the ease of use. So depending on, what type of data you guys have associated with it, most of the times it'll probably be those redacted call recordings where you would just upload it directly to the system after kind of going through that QA process, and it would transcribe. But for the purpose of this one, I'm going to show you an uploaded of a script. So let me go in and do that. So as you can see, you can come in and change the customer name. If you haven't gotten familiar with any of our different voices yet, go in and play around with them. I think we have above 13 different voices, different genders, different accents, and then we'll go through here. And so this is where it really starts to now tie in to the QA scorecard. And so when we're looking at this, one of the pieces is focused on, again, those keyword scores. So that's something where when I'm looking at my QA scorecard, I want them to make sure that they're greeting the customer and that they're saying, the appropriate company name and also saying their name. So this is something where I want them to say specifically the company name. I'll add that in there. How can I help? We want them to ask those questions and ask how they can assist them. This is something where you can add those alternative words in the back end. And so this is something where help could also be assist. So as agents are now running through these simulations, especially when they're in production already, they understand the call flow. Really, the goal of them is to get them to that next level of performance. And so these alternative words come in handy with those because they can now put it into their own words and just gain more confidence and comfortability with those specific simulations. So that's something I'd come in here and do. Again, when you're looking at mapping it exactly to your QA scorecard, here's where the point value changes. So like I mentioned, they're worth 5 points. So that's something where when you're mapping it, you can ensure and save it that way. And now that specific verbiage will be associated with 5 points specifically. Another thing I want to highlight here right at the beginning is looking at it from the customer point of view, right? The goal of these are to make them as realistic as possible. And so something I want to show you guys is actually, I think a lot of you are aware that you can do your own voice recordings, but the really cool thing about this is you can actually upload audio as well. And so this is something where if maybe it's a phone ringing, you want to specifically upload an actual phone ringing to whatever phone system you guys are using. So that's something you have the capability with as well. To give you kind of a couple examples of what it would look like too is we have some customers that actually are focused on empathy specifically, and they'll have actual audio recordings of babies crying in the background or horns honking. And so when agents are doing those advanced versions, it's really up to them to kind of listen and practice that active listening and identify that, oh, there's a baby crying in the background. And maybe that's something where they say, hey, I feel like I caught you in the middle of something. Do you mind if I give you a call back? Or are you busy? And so there's different ways to provide additional value outside of just what's scripted, right? Background noise is a huge component of it. So that's something that can be easily done there. So I'll kind of show you what this looks like specifically when you upload it. So I'm just going to grab the phone sound that we have, and then I'll go in and play it for you guys so you guys get an idea. So as realistic as it gets in there. So again, that's just kind of an additional way as you're building these out to make it realistic. So kind of going back to this actual QA process. So we're looking at it and we have greet the customer, you have that branding of the company name and line of business supported. They want to provide your name. So that's something I'm going to add in here as well as an additional keyword. And then ask how they can assist. So we're good for that one. That's really the kind of entire warmly welcome component of that QA scorecard all in one. And so this is something where, again, depending on what you want that call flow to look like, you can continue that process down here as well. So then we kind of move to the uncover needs and resolution. So we're looking at, they're providing and verifying specific date of birth, the first name, last name, and kind of what the goal outcome is here. So for this one, I'm not going to necessarily highlight any specific keywords just because it's not matching my QA score right now. But what will happen is I do want them to verify the first and last name. So this is something where when you're looking at keywords, you don't just need to do specific words. It could be entire phrases as well. So again, that's something I'll come in here, add those specific point values in and map to that specific process. Is this all making sense for you guys so far? Are you guys following along? Any questions? And make sure I have the chat. Got a thumbs up from Sebastian. Thumbs up from Anne. I love it. Cool. Feel free to throw something in the chat or come off mute if you guys do have any questions. So kind of to move on here. So we're going to go through the next piece is, clarify and confirm customers' requests. So in here, they're going in and, will this be a general consultation or a follow-up, right? So the goal of this simulation is they're asking for appointment setting and really going through it that way. So that's something I want to ensure that they're doing again to map to that. So changing that value in there. Something else we want to look at is obviously the tone, language, and clarity. So when we're looking at it from a language perspective, that's something, again, like I mentioned, can be done from a sentiment piece, but it could also be done from a actual keyword piece too. So when you look at language, do you want it to be, very professional? Do you want it to be more relaxed and rapport based? And so that's something that's changed within these specific script lines and script nodes here. And then looking at this, thank you so much for waiting. That's a really good point of empathy. So, that's something that I just want to highlight as an additional keyword. Maybe it's not the full 5 points, but they are doing their best throughout the entire call flow. We're asking some more probing questions here. Why would you like this to be scheduled? Again, this is another component of empathy. So I'm so sorry to hear that. Have you had any tests done? So I'm going to go through and add that as a keyword as well. So really just kind of building this out to those specific things. Again, for a lot of your guys' different, use cases, the goal isn't to have the agents fully scripted and reading things start to finish, right? It's allowing them that comfortability to put the script into their own words while they're still following that entire call flow. So that's why when we're looking at these, it's mapping to the QA scorecards and really identifying those alternative keywords in the back end. So again, another component of empathy in here. This is something where maybe I want to do it. I already have 2 points of empathy. And for me, that's something that I think is well enough already. So I'm going to leave that one personally. And then we're going to kind of move into kind of that closing spiel of it. So they're going through the verification process of the appointment setting, verifying the specific time. So that's something I want to add in there for that and change that to the point value. We're also looking at, reminding them in the QA scorecard, reminding the customer of the appointment requirement. So after this is all scheduled, here's where the reminders come in. So just let me give you some quick reminders. You said you didn't have any tests done, right? So that's something where I am just going to highlight quick reminders. Again, don't want it to be too scripted for this call flow, but I do want them to have those reminders in there. And then we'll get to the actual reminders. So the big components of this is the insurance card. So again, instead of highlighting the whole thing, I'm just going to go through and do one specific word. And then 15 minutes early. So that is something as well that I'm going to add as a keyword in here and go ahead and save that specific value as well. So that's really kind of what it looks like. The rest of it is, verifying, saying thank you, goodbye, all of that. But that's that entire call flow, right? So it took us maybe 5 minutes to map all of those specific things. And that's really where having that QA scorecard documented and broken out directly ties to it, because it's something you can kind of just go down the list. A lot of the calls, a lot of the content, the things that we're seeing, they do map to the scorecard, but it's not necessarily laid out like it is like this. And so that's something where having it up on one screen or even side by side and working simultaneously, now you have kind of this perfect golden call that you can reuse and focus on now to break out into other modules or micro sims for any other agents struggling with this. So any questions before I kind of get into how to now utilize this to break it out into micro sims and further simulations? Awesome. Everyone's a sim creation pro on this call. I love it. Cool. So in here, what I'm going to do is, again, you have a couple ways to actually create these micro sims out of what we just created. So looking at it, I'm going to go in and search for the sim that I just created up here in the top right. Here it is down at the bottom. So when you look at this, again, you have a couple options. What you could do is you could actually come in and clone this one. So you're now going to create a copy of it, or you have the option again to download the script. Personally, I'm going to go in and just clone it. And so you guys can kind of see what this would look like. But again, you have the option to clone it or download the script. Like when I created the sim originally, you would just upload it directly there. Since we already added the keywords, when you download it, those keywords will now be associated with it. So that time we spent to build out those keywords are now going to be associated with all of the sims here moving forward. So I'm going to go in and grab this copy and start editing it. So this is something now when we're looking back at the different simulations that we're going to create, again, there's multiple ways to do this. So for me, maybe I want to start off with just my QA scorecard and breaking it out into those 3 categories. So there's a couple ways to look at this. You can kind of break it out and go in and say, okay, the warm welcome, I want them to ask how they can assist the customer and start searching for that. So we have general consultation. Okay, so to me, right where that second kind of category comes in is right here. And so I can now come in and select all of the specific script lines that I maybe want to get rid of that don't necessarily apply to this specific one. Again, when you're downloading a script as another option as well, you can do this either directly in SimTrain like I'm doing, or you can do it via the export. So via like Microsoft Word, and you can edit it in there as well. Again, all of these keywords that you guys are seeing here will be associated when you go in and create that new version. So now you can come in here and now I have the opening of that call flow. I have that warmly welcome piece. And so this is something for me when my agents are struggling with the welcome component, I can give them this exact simulation and have them practice this. So really the benefit of these kind of micro sims is instead of them running that entire sim that we just created that might take, 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, they can go through this one, 3-4 times in the amount that it would take them to run the other one, but it's specific to the needs that they're struggling with. And so it really allows them to get more practice, but it's this hands-on practice that way too. So again, what I would do is just kind of come in here and maybe it's appointment setting and it is the warmly welcome. I can tag it down at the bottom with our labels and say QA scorecard, come in and do that, warmly welcome. All of those different things. And now it would be saved as this new one. So again, all the keywords that I want are in there and kind of go through it that way. So that's what it would look like. So now I have the entire call flow, and now I have the first step of our QA process already associated with that as well. So now we're going to move on to the other version so we can come through and maybe I'll try downloading the script for you guys so you get a better idea as well. So I'm going to go back to my original version, press download, and then I'll come in and create the new sim. So this one will be appointment setting. And it'll be, uncover needs resolution. So same thing, I want to map it to my QA scorecard. I just put it in there, so it's already under there. And then I'll add uncover needs resolution as well. So come in. So again, now I can just go back to where I was and upload that specific script line if I remember what it was, and come in here. And it was appointment. Here we go. So now I'm going to upload, again, that entire simulation. Same thing will pop up. You have the option to change the customer names, the voices. And now I can come through here. So again, to that same point, this one is going to be focused on the actual welcome or the actual resolution process. So I'm going to go in and delete this and go through it that way. So I already know where my kind of break is right here in this OK process. So I'm going to go through and delete those to start. And then kind of looking at it, when we're looking at it from the resolution versus the closing, we'll kind of see here, okay, after they go through that, we'll break this rest of it out as the closing loop as they're going through the reminders. So again, I'm going to go in and delete that. And now we have the entire sim for the resolution piece. As we're looking at this as well, this is something, again, where when you want to come in here and you're doing it from beginner, intermediate, and advanced, it's as quickly, possible to create the advanced versions by coming in here and just toggling off this view script in test mode. So again, we just created, 3 simulations within 5-10 minutes, but you could easily create, a 4th one right now by cloning this and turning that script test mode off. So I want this to be beginner version, so I'm going to save it that way. So again, now we have, whole process, and now we have step 1 and step 2. So we're going to get to step 3, and then I'll kind of show you guys what it would look like to actually publish this out as well. So, and for this one, I'm actually going to go in and show you how it can be done from an editing process in Word too. So that way you guys get an idea of all the different ways we can create simulations. So as you can see right here, this is that entire script line of the one we built, and it has these keywords already identified in here. So this is something where I can now just come in here and I'm going to delete all of that, start to finish, and here's my closing loop. So I'm going to change this as, closing for appointment setting. And I have my keywords already associated. I'm going to go back to SimTrain. Same thing, appointment setting. And then closing. Add in that QA scorecard. Closing. So now I will do kind of that same process where I will come in and just upload my specific script right here. And then now we have the closing loop of it. So really, again, looking at this as easy ways to create customized coaching based on the goals and specific things you want agents to hit in performance. And so looking at this, all of those components are there. Again, my components of the keywords have ported over throughout this entire process. So when you're building sims, again, it's not something where it needs to be customized on each level. It's really done from, one main level and then utilizing that in many different ways to reuse that content. So I'm going to go ahead and press proceed and publish. So now we have, 4 different simulations that we've created that really identify that entire process. And so a couple things you could do here is you could go ahead and just assign those one-off as needed. I personally am going to create them into a module that follows the entire QA process. So that's something in here. I can come in and now I'm going to assign all of the specific simulations that we just built. And so I have the appointment setting. That's that first one we did. I have the welcome and then the resolution. So really with those, I'm going to go in and press use sequence, and then I will press proceed as well. So now you have the option to reorder this. By me doing sequence, this now allows them to go through these in order. So when, again, we're looking at this as the steps and kind of process of the call, this is something where they'll need to see that entire call start to finish before they can get through the next one. And then after I'm done with that, that allows me the opportunity to assign them to either the specific teams or the specific agents when they're struggling with their QA scorecards. Again, this could be something where instead of having one for the warmly welcome, you could have 5 different scenarios in there and have a module that is the warmly welcome one. So when agents are now struggling with that specific component, you can assign them that module as well. So it's kind of this endless evolution of ways you can create the content to really help, improve the performance for those specific agents. And again, on this one-on-one kind of customized level. So I'm going to pause there. You guys kind of saw a lot of different ways to create sims, how to tie it. What questions, comments, ideas do you guys have after kind of seeing this process? Anyone? No one? Awesome. Well, I must have did my job right if there's no questions. Cool. So I know we have about 20 minutes left here. Really, that was kind of the basis of what I wanted to show you guys. So I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time. If there are questions, please go ahead and ask. Again, the goal of us doing these weekly tips and tricks sessions are to get all of the questions and ideas from you guys, kind of allow you the opportunity to speak with, different members of our team, because each of us have different ideas and tips and tricks. Big component of this is kind of why I wanted to go through QA scorecards specifically and kind of talk about this. As I'm sure some of you guys have heard, we're moving to more of this coaching phase, and we've developed a lot of things within the product throughout the past couple months. But we also have a lot of exciting things coming in Q1 of 2024 as well that include some training and coaching plans. So it really kind of ties to a lot of the stuff we covered today, where you're going to be able to kind of look at specific completion metrics and tie them to specific, sims or modules for those agents. And so this is kind of that first evolution for it. So if you haven't heard of it yet, I would definitely recommend, reaching out to your CSM or your main point of contact as we start getting into this development phase of this feature for Q1, because it is going to be a really exciting tool. So it's going to be very beneficial for both the training and the coaching side of things. Awesome. Well, I appreciate everyone joining, and I hope you all have happy holidays.